has had a crash, but his telecom team, a couple of them at least, waited for him. He's okay, he's back in the field. There are now only 4 teams left in the Tour de France of the 21 that still have 9 men following retirement also today. At the moment, with 158 of the 189 riders in the race. And I know there's great interest too about Bram de Groot. The rider had that spectacular crash yesterday. Well, the problem was he was unconscious when the medics got to him, and that was the grave concern because he wasn't coming round. But the good news is now he's in hospital. Everybody is very happy with his progress. All the monitors of the machinery on him are saying the right things, and they're very confident that very soon he'll be able to go home. So that is very good news. Now, as we look down here on the slopes of the Col de Portillon, Paul, a climb that you have raced over, this is a cruel stage today. And this man, what can you say about him?
Well, I've got to take my hat off to Jaja, because at the start of this season he didn't even know if he was going to race at all. He's gone out on the attack today, and the reason he's done that is, one, to try and take the sting out of the tail of the attackers, but also, not only that, he's going to try and build up a big lead in the King of the Mountains competition. These 2 chasers now have joined. This is Vermote, the rider from Lotto, at the front. He's joined by Alexander Vinokurov from Kazakhstan, the telecom rider, and currently they're 3 minutes 20 seconds behind the lone leader. The main field more than 9 minutes back, and all of the time being led by the US Postal Service team. But just a few moments ago, in fact, Tyler Hamilton had a very unfortunate incident. I think there was a problem with his rear mechanism which forced him to stop at the side of the road, and that is very often the case here when you get into the mountains, because the gear ratios are so much bigger. Another American at the back of the main field also having a hard time today, Jonathan Borters, the climber from Crédit Agricole. I think many riders now starting to suffer from the bad weather that we had leading into the Alpine stages.
So 6 kilometres to climb of the Portillon. The breakaway starting at 27 kilometres today, as we see riders here launching their attacks now from the head of the peloton, which is just on 10 minutes behind Laurent Jalabert. As Kelme launched, the man who won the stage yesterday, there, Cadines, and the other rider with him, Pascal Rodriguez of Benesto, and this man here is Montgomery, the Swiss rider on the Française de Jeu team. Let me just quickly recap for you the 9 riders who escaped at 27 kilometres. Alexander Vinokurov, Fabio Baldato, Steve Vermeaux, Thomas Brogina, Alberto Lopez de Munier, Laurent Jalabert, Laurent Roux, the leader of the King of the Mountains, Antonio Taula, and Xavier Yon. First time Yon has been in a break. As we look here now at Stuart O'Grady having a bit of trouble at the back of the field. Zabel, by the way, his main rival for that green jersey, has already been dropped today. We got to the Col de Porte Aspe after 73 kilometres, where Roux, the leader of the King of the Mountains, went over first, ahead of Jalabert, Lopez de Monaine and Vinokurov. The peloton were timed at 5.5 minutes. On to the Col de Monte, that climb where 40 years ago Louis Ocaña lost his chance of beating Eddy Merckx in the Tour de France when, in a terrible storm, he crashed out of the race wearing the yellow jersey. On the Col de Monte then, Jalabert went over there, and 7.25 minutes ahead of the peloton. He was on his own. He was on his own when we raced into Spain for a few kilometres, and he's on his own now as we climb up the Col de Portillon. And if he keeps scoring points, he could be the leader of the King of the Mountains by the time we get to the Plat d'Aix today.
So the amazing saga of Laurent Jalabert continues on this 88th Tour de France. 2 stage wins, a dominant breakaway today. Keep in mind, 5 months ago, he was lying in a hospital bed with 3 broken bones in his back, wondering if he would ever ride again. He is a star on tour. Stage 13 of the Tour de France. I'm Bob Varsho, along with Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen. Watching a group of riders trying to bridge up. Laurent Jalabert is out front with a gap of 3 minutes and 20 seconds to a pair of pursuers, Alexander Vinokurov and Steve Vermeaux. Then another minute 10 seconds back is a group of 6 riders trying to run down those ahead. And in that group of 6 riders is Tomasz Brogina, a Polish rider with the iBenesto.com team. Why do I point that out? Well, the last time a stage finished atop the Plat d'Aix on tour was back in 1993 when Zenon Jaluska, a Polish rider, scored the stage victory. Thus far, the only Polish stage winner ever on the Tour de France. He went on to finish 3rd in the Tour that year. Today marks the 8th Tour stage winner atop Plat d'Aix. Now standing by to pick up the live race call, let's rejoin Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen.
From the helicopter, the finest seat in the house on a beautiful day in the Pyrenees. We're looking down on the peloton there. And just going away from the peloton, Santiago Botero, last year's king of the mountains, trying to get a little bit of action. This is the rear of the race now. This is what it's like at the back of the bunch on the Col de Portillon. The world champion, Roman Weinstein's not enjoying the race at all this year, slipping away from the back of the field. Stuart O'Grady of Australia has been detached. So too a while back now has Eric Zabel, as all of the riders start to feel the pain of the day. And this is the easier climbs of the day. We've still to climb the Col de Peyresourde, which is high above Luchon. Then we've got the not insignificant climb through the valley, the Lorraine Valley, and then we come onto the Brute at the end, which is the climb to Pla d'Adet. And this is a climb not used until recent years of the Tour de France. We've only climbed it 7 times. As again we see the man who turned out to be the star of the time trial and of yesterday's stage, Lyseca, putting in a move again. This man is turning out to be something of a star of this year's Tour.
Well, he's getting a first crack at the Tour de France, having ridden for the small Euskadi team, which nowadays is sponsored by Euskaltel, the Basque telephone company. He's a man who has ridden very well in the Tour of Spain in the recent years, but now he's getting a good crack at the Tour de France. This is still the rear of the main field, and a lot of riders going out of the back. Number 19 there was Eric Zabel. The green shorts there from the Credit Agricole rider is a rider called Jens Voigt, the former wearer of the yellow jersey. A lot of panic at the back of the main field, and these riders soon will have to organize themselves into a huge autobus to make sure they don't get eliminated tonight. Strange to see this Colombian rider coming out to the back at the moment, Pascual Lorente. We saw him very aggressive in the early stages, and now there's 1 or 2 riders from Cofidis trying to leap off the front.
Looks like David Moncoutier here having a little dig at the front, and he is indeed one of the stars of the future on the Cofidis team. But it's interesting to see that Pascual Lorente is having a bit of trouble. I think there's been an acceleration in the peloton here. Caught 1 or 2 riders off guard. They were ready to tempo climb this, thinking the pressure won't go on just yet because it's still a long way through the last climb still to come. Conditions as hot as this, they don't want to overdo it too soon. But if you look down there, that peloton is reducing in size quite dramatically. No further time checks at the moment. It's still not far off 10 minutes to this rider here, Laurent Jalabert. No, it's not his teammate at the back here. They tried to catch us out there. Same colours, a different man, and this rider is his brother Nicolas Jalabert. Meanwhile, back at the front, taking the King of the Mountains points, is a senior brother, Laurent, who is by far the better rider of the two. But wherever Laurent goes with his contracts, he always takes his brother with him. And Laurent now has scored maximum points on 2 major climbs here, both third category. Second on the Col de Porte d'Aspet, second category. That is where the monument is to the Italian Olympic champion Fabio Casatelli, who died when a member of the Motorola team. And in fact, the organization, as always, paid homage on the way by driving ahead earlier this morning. So 51 points the difference between Laurent Roux, the leader, and indeed Laurent Jalabert. But he's closing in now. Keeps scoring like this, he might get what I think is his prime ambition this year, and that is to be King of the Mountains of the Tour de France. First chance, Paul, to see the US Postal Boys close up, riding at the front, always riding like they've got the leader of the race on their team already.
They've assumed, I think, for the last couple of days they have the leader of the Tour de France. Although Lance Armstrong doesn't yet have the yellow jersey on his shoulders, he's brought all of his Spanish-speaking riders to the front. There is his arch rival, Jan Ullrich, and he will expect Ullrich to try and challenge all the way up to Paris, because as Armstrong said, he feels that this man is a very talented bike rider. He's very aggressive, and he's coming to this Tour de France with the best form he's had in recent years. And Armstrong, in the back of his mind, is somewhat worried about having a bad day. We saw that before, and if that happens, he could find himself losing a few minutes. A man having a bad day at the moment, Axel Merckx, wears 194. I expected to see Axel much closer to the front.
The descent of the Col de Portillon, 127 kilometers into the race today, and the man in the lead still is Laurent Jalabert.
And Jalabert begins one of his trademark descents. This is the way he has attacked stage after stage on this year's tour, and it has succeeded for him. Right now, he is well out in front, 2 stage wins already in his pocket, 3 minutes and 20 seconds ahead. Jaja. The ultimate descender on this year's Tour de France. This is Laurent Jalabert. Moments ago, while flying down the hill at about 45 miles an hour, Jalabert reached back into his pocket, pulled out what I think was a candy bar, pulled the wrap off of it using only his right hand while braking with his left. Amazing.
settling down to his time trial position. Remember, we're looking at a former world time trial champion. In a remarkable year it was a couple of years ago. He never had won a time trial in a professional bike race. And in March, he won the time trial of Paris-Nice. And in October, his second time trial was the world title. And that's a remarkable improvement for him.
Very similar, the progression of Laurent Jalabert's career, to that of Sean Kelly. Sean Kelly started his career off as a superb bunch sprinter, and as he got older he got stronger, and as he got stronger he was able to ride good time trials. We saw Kelly win some magnificent time trials in races around the world, especially in Paris-Nice, and that is almost exactly the same way that Laurent Jalabert's career has developed. It's amazing how a small thing in a rider's life can actually change the direction his career takes. In this group now we can see a man whose career has taken a definite turn for the better this year in the Tour de France, the yellow jersey on the shoulders of Francois Simon, but he must certainly feel today, see the writing on the wall, because as we get closer to the finish this man will fatigue. He's not a great climber, and I'm so impressed with the way he's ridden so far in the defense of that yellow jersey. But huge pressure on the front of the main field right now by US Postal Service. They want to blow the race apart today. They've still got a very good complement of riders. Tyler Hamilton, after that earlier mechanical incident, is back up into second place. Yaroslav Ekimov seems to have recovered over the last couple of days as well. Armstrong just sitting at the back end of his group here, piloting them on the early slopes of the climb. He looks so relaxed today. A huge game of poker on the first Alpine day when we saw him sitting at the back end of the main field, and everybody bar none, I think, in this commentary position here thought that Armstrong was having a hard day, and he came up trumps at the end of the day and blew everybody apart on the climb up to Alpe d'Huez.
Looks to be no more than 50 riders left in the sharp end of the peloton now, as the riders just being... The strong boys are riding what they call a tempo pace, and the others that can't match are simply falling back, settling into what they would call the autobus, where they gather together for protection against the elimination time of the day. Because there is a race rule, more than 20% of the field cannot be eliminated on any one day. So they count everybody around them and say, right, boys, we're safe. And they just ride to the finish as best they can. Now we're looking back with Laurent Jalabert descending rapidly, almost completed his descent now of the Col de Portillon, which stands at 1,320 meters, and then he'll just race through the valley, and then he'll kick up around the back of Luchon and climb the Col de Peyresourde. And that will be the third to last climb of the day. But by my calculation now, he has the lead in the King of the Mountains, which is his primary objective. He went up the first climb with Laurent Roux, the leader of the mountains. In fact, Laurent beat him. Jalabert was only second there. But once on the climb of Col de Monte, I presume Jalabert decided he wasn't going to get the better of Roux if they went up to the climb together. So he attacked and he finished alone in the lead. Went over the Col de Monte, a minute and 5 ahead of Vinokurov, and 7 minutes 15 ahead of the group containing Roux. And since then, Roux has struggled. He's scoring minor points, but they are minor now on these first category climbs. So if he hasn't got the lead, Paul, he's jolly close to it.
Well, he will still stay clear over the Col de Peyresourde, because the way Jalabert is riding right now, he is not going to weaken at all. And I can see him staying across the top of the next two climbs in first position. There's no major reaction in the main field, and I would think that reaction would come on the Col de Val-Luron from Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich and the big names, because they must certainly today try and distance themselves between Francois Simon and the man who currently lies second in the overall standings, Andrei Kivilev. Kivilev is just 36 seconds ahead of Lance Armstrong. I would expect him to get completely blown away today. The white jersey there is on the shoulders of the man that we think is a huge revelation of this year's Tour, Oscar Sevilla, the Kelme rider coming to the Tour de France for the first time, and just on his shoulder the smaller figure of the Mapei rider Paolo Bettini, who was so courageous on yesterday's stage, trying to get himself the stage victory, but just losing out within 5 kilometers of the end.
So over the top of the Portillon, this is the situation. Vinokurov and Vermeer have gone over 3 minutes 25 seconds back. Thomas Brogina 4 minutes 20. Then comes Alberto Lopez de Monain and Fabio Baldato at 5 minutes 10. And then Laurent Roux and Antonio Tauler have gone over at 5 minutes 40. So Roux there has gone over in 6th place, I think. Maybe 7th. 7th place for him over the top of the climb. So these boys now are riding up towards the top of the Col de Portillon, and the gap is still considerable, but to be expected, I think, at this stage of the day. They've still got plenty of time to reduce. We saw what Armstrong was capable of yesterday when he got away in that little attack caused by Ullrich on the final climb. and rip the legs off everybody towards the top. But currently, the last time check we had to the field was 9 minutes and 50 seconds. And there won't be too many people worried about this at the moment, because the best placed rider in the lead is Laurent Jalabert, 26 minutes and 57 seconds down overall. Vinokurov is just behind him, 26 minutes and 37 seconds. He's slightly better than Jalabert at the moment.
All right, gentlemen, Laurent Jalabert continues his spectacular riding, now at the 134-kilometer mark, leaving about 59 kilometers roughly to the end of today's stage 13. But there is so much desperate climbing still to come. There's the gap to the peloton, 9 minutes 25 seconds. De France, a beautiful view as the peloton begins its descent in pursuit of Laurent Jalabert, the breakaway leader of this race since about 27 kilometers in. We are now 137 kilometers into the stage with about 58 to go. The peloton is nearly 10 minutes back with Lance Armstrong and all the other key contenders for the title. Once again, here are Phil and Paul.
These are the two chasers here, and Steve Vermeaux is riding very well now. And remember, he lost one of the most unluckiest riders to retire yesterday, I think, was Kurt van der Wouw. There is the gap, so but how he could take all that in, I'll never know. Kurt van der Wouw, who crashed spectacularly coming into Axley Term yesterday, remounted from what seemed a very bad crash, okay, and immediately fell off again, and this time broke his collarbone. Now, can you believe that for luck?
That is seriously bad luck. Another man who had to abandon from the Tour de France yesterday because of that crash was also Sergei Ivanov, the winner of the stage into Aix-les-Bains. This man here, though, is going past the banner indicating 13 kilometers to go to the summit of the Col de Peyresourde, and this is a long climb with a steep gradient as well. It's a 7% average grade to the summit here, and this is going to take Jalabert around about 35 minutes of climbing, and that is something that nobody wants to look forward to. It's a tough climb. It's tougher at the bottom, then levels out in the middle part of the climb before actually kicking up for the last 4 or 5 kilometers, and a very difficult descent down the other side. These riders facing a very difficult stage today. They've gone over 3 major climbs already and now about to hit the 4th one of the day, 1,569 meters, the Col de Peyresourde. That still leaves them 3 climbs before they come up to the finish line at Pallada Day. There's a long day still in the saddle.
It certainly is, but you will notice how the scenery has changed somewhat from yesterday. We're in the Pyrenean Occidental, which is the lower undulations of the Pyrenees, and the beautiful area of the Ariège, where the rivers flow out of the mountains. It is stunning scenery, but very dangerous roads are racing on. They're very narrow, and they twist and kick and climb heights very quickly indeed. Here we're now in the high mountains of the Pyrenees. We're racing down valleys, and then you are climbing out on kilometers of 25-kilometer high mountain climbs, right on the spine of Spain. If you go over the top of the Pyrenees, you go into Spain, and the cars from Spain today have been coming out one after another. We briefly went in because to approach the Col de Portillon, you have to dive briefly into Spain to get round to climb over back into France. And this is the wonder of the Tour de France as it courses now through the second mountain chain of Europe here.
The climb here of the Col de Peyresourde brings back one of my bad memories of the Tour de France, because a few years ago we actually started a stage in Luchon, and this was the first climb of the day. At 0 kilometers we went immediately uphill, and I tell you what, the bunch was spread all over the place by the finish of the day. But once again, Phil, I managed to get myself just inside the time limit at the end to fight another day.
He's a canny lad, is Paul. You'll have a job to get rid of him. I've been trying for 28 years.
And I'm still here, still stuck on the tail. But Jalabert has got a superb chance today to stay off the front of the main field, because, as I said just a bit earlier, a lone man over the mountains doesn't lose too much time on the big climbs, and Jalabert will ride his own tempo on these climbs, and we've seen in this Tour de France so far that he's riding very well, and he won't lose anything at all on the descents. So keep our fingers crossed for Jaja. He may get a huge 3rd stage victory, and if he were to win a mountain stage, that would really put the icing on the cake for his Tour de France this year.
Well, this is his 10th tour. He rode his first one in 1991. He has had stage wins in Brussels, in Belgium, in Monday, which was on Bastille Day in 1995. He did it again in Verdun this year when he won again on Bastille Day. He has won the green jersey, which he did in 1992. He is a real battler. He even got up the yellow jersey for a couple of days in 1995 when he finished 4th on that occasion on the GC. But he comes here seemingly after a really bad start to the season when he fell off a ladder and broke his ribs and thought he was never going to race again at any level, and he's come again. The rest period has helped the cyclist who hasn't ridden as many races as other riders. He's so fresh, and what's more, his enthusiasm is all there, and he's looking for a victory in something, and he's now got the lead in the King of the Mountains. There's the following cars in the Tour de France, and they're all watching one man today.
And that man is Laurent Jalabert, 13 years as a professional and a classic example of how experience can pay. And experience has come at a cost for many of the riders on this year's tour. Of the 31 currently out of the Tour de France, 7 were in the young rider category. 17 young riders still out there. We'll be back. Along with Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen, a special 4-hour live edition of OLN's Tour de France coverage. Today, the massive climbing stage from Foix to Saint-Laurent-Soulan, climbing to the top of the Pla d'Ade. There you see Lance Armstrong shadowed by Jan Ullrich, reaching around to the back of his jersey. 4 U.S. Postal Service riders at the front. Then Ullrich, who yesterday, or 2 days ago, that is, on the rest day, held a press conference and told the press, hey, I'm riding as hard as I can, trying to deal with Lance Armstrong. Thus far, it has been advantage Armstrong in each of their toe-to-toe meetings. We have been through the Lerida province in Spain. We are now back into France. Once again, here are Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen.
A little bit of a split in the back of the peloton, having just been told that Igor Gonzalez de Galeano has had a flat tyre, lying 7th in the race. So an exciting moment for him, and the cars will take care of that. We'll go back up to the leader, who doesn't care who punctures behind him, because he's having a wonderful day riding in solitary splendour through the Pyrenees. He's been away since the 27th kilometre today, Laurent Jalabert. We're now on the climb of the Col de Peyresourde, which will take us up to kilometre 150. It's a 13-kilometre ascent, and he's about a quarter of the way up just now, Laurent Jalabert, not panicking, holding his tempo and keeping a distance on the main field of nearly 10 minutes. Here is the little group containing Les Sacca that got away. They're about a minute ahead of the peloton, going through Luchon now. And this rider here enjoying his tour. And we've got David Moncoutier, he's the Cofidis rider, number 17 there. And this is Pascal Rodriguez, Benesto.
Laurent Jalabert at the front of the race, Phil, has been leading the race for 115 kilometres so far. This is rather a dangerous move, though, with men like Stefano Garzelli in it. He's the man who last year won the Giro d'Italia. This year had to retire because of bronchitis, and he's hoping to try and make a name for himself and the Mappé team, who have certainly not been very successful so far here on the roads of the Tour. But this is a dangerous move to allow a man like Santiago Botero, last year's King of the Mountains winner, to get into, because this is the kind of stage when the Kelme team want to try and change the look of the overall standings and put men like Jan Ullrich and Josiba Bolocki into difficulty, because Bolocki has not been as brilliant as we expected him to, and I think the other riders in Once at the moment are a lot stronger than their team leader.
Gave you a wrong name there. It was Eladio Jimenez from Benesto. They swapped places early on in the attack, and Jimenez has gone clear. Looking down on Luchon, this town of beautiful buildings, narrow streets, and always a packed crowd. Now, if you're wondering where all the riders have been spread today all across the mountains, that is just about right. We've got one man in the lead, Laurent Jalabert, being traced by 2 men at 3 minutes 36 seconds, Vinokurov and Vermeaux. Brogina is riding on his own at the moment at 4 minutes 20. Then Fabio Baldato, Lopez Di Monaine. This is in a small group at 5 minutes 10. Also includes Laurent Jalabert, a group containing Xavier Yann, Laurent Roux, Antonio Taula. They're all splitting up behind. And then the peloton comes at nearly 10 minutes. But we do have this group now containing Les Sacca that we've just seen: Jimenez, Botero, Moncoutier and Garzelli. They are the last group on the road before the peloton. Xavier Yon here is in a bit of trouble now as the Peyresourde bites his feet off. He's been left by the breakaway. He was one of the original 9 men today to start the move. And we've also got there Alberto Lopez Di Monaine. This is the rider sat at the back. In fact, we're back here with the other group now. So Jan must have come straight through, because this is the group containing Les Sacca.
Javier Yon used to ride for the Française de Jeux team, and he now rides for Big Mat. And of all the French teams that were brought into the Tour de France, Big Mat is the team that we've seen the least of. which is a shame because they had two very good sprinters that we could have possibly had here, Jeremy Hunt and Jay Sweet. Stefano Garzelli on the front of this group is a magnificent bike rider. We've seen him ride superbly in the Giro d'Italia. He's 28 years of age from Varese, which is not too far away from Como in northern Italy. He won a stage in last year's Giro d'Italia as well, and a couple of years ago he won the Tour of Switzerland.
Jalabert enjoying the sun, and you can see how it's beginning to kick up steeply now. This was the climb when it was a time trial back in 1962, if memory serves me correct. I remember I was a young cyclist in those days, very young, I hasten to add, and my best friend sent me a postcard from Luchon when I didn't even know where it was, and he said some English guy is leading the Tour de France called Tommy Simpson. And Tom, of course, was an absolutely superb British cyclist and sadly died in the Tour de France in 1967. And that was on stage 13 on what was then July the 13th as well. And poor old Tom died, but he lost the yellow jersey that day in the time trial, having won it the previous day in the Pyrenees. And what a great competitor he was. Now looking at the chasers, George Hincapie on the front with Tyler Hamilton. It looks like they're finding their climbing legs. The gap is 10-20, still losing ground to Jalabert, note. Nobody over worried about that just yet. Jalabert is now 16 minutes off the leader's yellow jersey, but that is nothing to worry about at this stage.
It's amazing how US Postal have turned around in the last few days. I think that rest day came just on time for them to recover and get their energy levels topped up again, because they now know how important it's going to be to protect this man, Lance Armstrong, in the mountains.
Yes, indeed. The question is not whether Lance Armstrong will attack today, but when and how hard. For that, he will rely on what his body is telling him and how well his teammates are escorting him through the mountain, as well as what his rivals are doing. Out in front of him, there aren't too many rivals. Those are mainly behind him. Want to open up some ground in his quest for the yellow jersey. We'll be back. Pictures, team cars are coming forward, distributing drinks, and the telecom team for Jan Ullrich is moving past the U.S. Postal Service riders to drive the peloton a bit. Is this the beginning of an early launch for their man Jan Ullrich? We're about to find out as we continue to cycle through the beautiful Pyrenees. Once again, here are Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen with the race call.
Oh, looking down the Pyrenees, and it's not just the weather that's getting hot now, and Jalabert won't know much about this, but the pace has suddenly been picked up by none other than Jan Ullrich's telecom team, pushing Postal into the second rank. And Ullrich, talking to his team manager, I think he's planning now to try and test Armstrong over a greater distance from the finish. He realized he has no answer to Armstrong's accelerations on these last climbs up to the line, and he's lifting the tempo very early today.
All of that acceleration is doing nothing at all to the race of Laurent Jalabert at the front. He's riding his own tempo right now, keeping himself quite comfortably inside his red zone, riding a sensible pace so as not to push himself too far over the limit. He will try and lose as little time as possible over the climb, and then hope, as he's on the descent, he can increase his advantage over the main field. The main field now, Phil, is starting to lose several riders from the back end of the group, and one man already in difficulty, in fact, is Carlos Sastre, the Once rider in the pink jersey at the back. This acceleration has come all because of Team Telecom. Armstrong has been put into difficulty in the second mountain stages in the past, and that may well be what is going through Jan Ullrich's mind today. He wants to try and crack the American, and the only way he can do that is by going out on the attack very early on.
Sastre's in good company, Paul, because they just dropped yesterday's winner. Felix Cardenas has been dropped by the peloton, and he also is in trouble now, and this is the reason that at the front here, as the pace is accelerated, Jens Heppner, and they're going very, very quick now. And the word has gone out, obviously, from Ullrich. Kevin Livingstone is here, Guerini, and also Andreas Clouden. They've been told now to go quicker, and they're hurting everybody. We'll see the time on Jalabert come down quickly, I think.
This is a great battle. Ullrich will not lay down arms. He's won the Tour de France once before, and he wants to win again. His face here not showing any emotion at all. Queuing up behind them are the blue jerseys of US Postal Service. Armstrong there just through the gap, Phil. You can see calm as ever, not actually sweating for the moment, waiting for the moment to pounce. At the back, this is Hincapie. Hincapie's done his job for the day. George is not a great climber, but he's done a great job of work today, keeping the tempo high alongside the Russian rider Yaroslav Ekimov. For Georgie now, his day is over. All he can hope to do is get himself to the finish as comfortably as possible.
And he's still got two huge climbs to come after this one as well. So Hincapie has been hurt by the lifting of the pace. He's not the only one here now, as Bonjour riders start to shell away from the back too. This looks like Walter Bennett too. He's gone back. And that's not good news for Francois Simon, the yellow jersey, but he's still down there. You can see the yellow jersey of Simon. Again riding an inspired stage of the Tour de France, and good luck to him as he tries to hang on to men who have built much bigger reputations than he.
Well, Jalabert is in fact increasing his lead over the chasers at the moment, but not over the main field, who are starting to eat into his lead. And the next time we get a time check from the bunch, I would expect it to be back down inside the 9-minute mark. This is Hepner on the front, followed there by Guerini. Guerini riding a lot better than he was in the Alps, and very much shadowed there by Andreas Kloden. The back end of the group, though, Phil, a lot of riders in serious difficulty. There is Paolo Bettini on the far side, and having a hard time in this year's Tour de France, wearing number 12 there, Udo Bolt, is not the great climber that he was.
31 miles or 50 kilometers to go for Jalabert. It doesn't sound very far, does it? But the profile says it is going to take probably the best part of an hour and a half of racing for the riders at the front end. Now this is Laurent Brochard here, who's trying to just hang on to wheels, because there is real pressure here now. And the Telecom boys, with this sort of tempo, is this Patero coming back? No, this is actually Antonio Tauler, the big Kelme rider, who was one of the original riders in the 9-man break today. He's now come back into the fold and will probably pass straight through, I would think, because those legs are probably quite tired. But we saw this as we approached Alpe d'Huez, Paul, over the big mountains there. And once onto the final climb, Armstrong just left Ullrich behind. Now, what's going to happen now? There's a little bit of argument going on here.
The problem there with Kloden, I'm not quite sure what was wrong with him at all, but he didn't look very happy, did he? Kevin Livingston taking up the pace. The Italian champion, who's really one of the heroes of this Tour de France, Daniele Nardello, going backwards today. He's had a real hard Tour de France after crashing on the first road stage. One of the Once riders at the back here, and a few moments ago, in fact, we were seeing that, in fact, Igor Gonzalez Goliano was at the back, but that was Carlos Sastre going backwards, and that is a major surprise for me to see him, because he was one of the revelations of the opening prologue. This crouched figure now of a Telecom rider will be Jens Hepner. He did his turns at the front, and he's now leading it up to the big climbers. Kevin Livingston, a change of jerseys and a change of tactics for him, but it's still the same thing in the mountains. Go to the front and ride as hard as possible for your leader. And there is his leader, Jan Ullrich.
And I wonder what Lance Armstrong thinks of his ex-mate, Kevin Livingstone, setting the pace here now for his biggest rival, Jan Ullrich. As behind the pace of the Telecom, and includes now the yellow jersey, losing ground very, very quickly. And this is very early on here. Now, Francois Simon has got to finish within 9 minutes of Armstrong and 8 3/4 of Kivilev to keep that yellow jersey. And he's cracking on the Col de Peyresourde with 2 more big climbs to come today. I'm afraid if he doesn't get back on the descent, he will lose more than that big time today.
He's still got about 6 kilometers of climbing to go to the finish, and if he loses a lot of time on this climb, he will not reintegrate the bunch on the descent, because the descent is very short, and then you're climbing almost immediately after that. He has a teammate with him to help out for the moment, but that won't be such a great advantage. Jean-Cyril Robin is the man pacing him, a former teammate of Lance Armstrong on the US Postal Service, but Francois Simon is in serious difficulty right now, and the yellow jersey dream is slipping away.
So a tough break for Francois Simon. We have passed into a new region of France. It's officially the Département des Hautes-Pyrénées, Department of the High Pyrenees, and they are not kidding. We have several of them still to climb. There is Jan Ullrich. He'll be back to France. Jalabert climbing once again. The Frenchman has been absolutely amazing. In its headline this morning, the French daily sports paper L'Equipe referred to Lance Armstrong as the man of steel. I think you'd have to say there's some pretty tough stuff in Laurent Jalabert as well, who has come back from injury. He has won a couple of tour stages on this year's tour, and on the breakaways, he is absolute magic. He is now 3 minutes 45 seconds ahead of his nearest rivals, looking for his 3rd stage win. Once again, here are Phil and Paul.
Well, as the sun beats down, it's well past high noon in France. It's just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon now. There's the latest. 3:45 to Steve Vermeaux of Belgium and Alexander Vinokurov of Kazakhstan. And Laurent Jalabert passing through a Dutch encampment here with the odd Germans there as well. We've seen the names of Eric Decker and other riders, Servais Knaven, painted on the road. But this man doesn't care. He's keeping his tempo, and he's just trying to survive now. He should well top the climb here at the Peyresourde, and if he wasn't quite in the lead thus far today, he certainly will be once he's over the top of this first category climb. And he'll be at 150 kilometres in, with 44 to race down, I should say up to the finish at Plat d'Aix. There's a marvellous crowd here, and as soon as the Tour goes through, they'll be packing the bags and nipping over to the Col de Tourmalet for tomorrow's stage, because it runs almost in parallel to this one as it moves away to the big finish on Luz Ardiden. Two fabulous high mountain days here in the Pyrenees, and the weather simply superb.
Well, that group of Lance Armstrong really has blown to pieces right now. There are not very many more than 20 riders in that group, and the leader of the bike race, Francois Simon, has been left behind. In a few moments' time, though, Phil, once we get into this group, we will see if Andrei Kivilev is still there. There is Atienza, the Cofidis rider, wearing 72. The man we're looking for is the man who wears 74. He is second in the overall standings, but because of this pressure, I would not be surprised to see that he, too, has been left behind by the main field.
Well, the Telecom continue to drive. This is what is left of the main field. Once have got a number of riders still here. Ullrich is a rider who's just been dropped as well.
Coming over race radio, the number 74 has been given out as being in this group. There is a Cofidis rider near the front, so Andrei Kivilev, for the moment, is riding himself up towards first place in the overall standings, but that is assuming he can stay with Armstrong and Ullrich over the next two big climbs. Laurent Jalabert has still got a long way to go to the summit of this climb. I would estimate around about 5 kilometres. And in the car up alongside him, a man who won the Tour de France back in 1996, the team captain, the team leader of CSC World Online, Bjarne Riis.
Yes, Bjarne was a good climber in his day as well, wore the polka dot jersey. Now he's looking to see if this man can do it. As the Lotto, we're in the Belgian sector of the climb now, as they cheer on the Lotto team. At 48 kilometres to go, these kilometres tick off rather slowly now. Takes them around 3.5 to 4 minutes to climb a kilometre on a mountain this steep. And Jalabert just settling in. But it is a difficult race for everybody today, and remember, they've got to do it all again tomorrow. So if the big leaders like Ullrich and the Telecoms and Armstrong do push the pace this far out from the finish today, goodness knows what will happen tomorrow. We're going back 9.5 minutes down to the field now. There is Jan Ullrich. There behind him is Oscar Sevilla, one of the great finds of this year's Tour de France. Grimacing a little bit, well, he should do. He's only a youngster, and he's having a wonderful tour. He rides in the white jersey. He's engaged in a real good battle for that white jersey, by the way. He's only a few seconds between him and Mancebo, who won it last year. And he is also in this group. It's given to the rider under 26, who is the highest in the overall classification each night. And at the moment, Oscar Sevilla has the right to wear it. There's out across the Pyrenees. You can see the helicopter in the centre of our picture. That's probably flying over the leader of the race right now as we look down. In fact, it looks like we're flying over. No, we're over the peloton. So the other chopper will be over Laurent Jalabert, but that group has dwindled to what is purely now the stars of the Tour, and a lot of them are Spanish.
This is Spanish terrain just over the border. The riders will have known that their families are going to come and witness the big battles today, because they expect a huge battle to come from the Spanish rider. Michael Bogard in the orange there is in difficulty. He's going to get left behind very shortly. A man who thought he could ride high in the overall standings at the Tour de France, but having difficulty with the high mountains. The man alongside him is Mario Ertz, wears number 62 of Lotto, and this group is getting smaller and more select with every kilometre of this third from last climb of the day, the Col de Peyresourde. It climbs up to 1,569 meters, which is around about 5,500 feet. A lot of climbing. These climbers will go up 3,000 feet in this one ascent there. 51, Phil's favorite number, but today it's not very lucky at all for Michael Bogard.
No, we're going up here to Fabio Baldato, who has now been dropped from the lead in breakaways, one of the original 9. They're all slowly giving up on the mountains today. This is Laurent Routu, ex-leader of the King of the Mountains.
Wearing that polka dot jersey that was begun by a French candy company to advertise their products. They are now gone. Champion, a supermarket company, is now the sponsor of the King of the Mountains competition, but the jersey remains red polka dots on a white field. We'll be back to the Tour.